Welcome to Envision Radio from United Way of Greater Charlottesville and City of Promise and News Radio 98.9, 1070 AM WINA, and brought to you by the Jefferson School Foundation with Markiana and Price, coming to you here in downtown Charlottesville. Yay! It's been 90 degrees this week, but now it's raining and cold. This is too much.
It's supposed to snow today.
Somebody said something about snow.
How is that? I don't understand the weather.
Global
Can we
warming?
just have a
Climate
very
change?
brief, I don't get it.
Something's
But I don't get
Something's
it.
not right.
But I was taught, I thought that water freezes at a temperature. So how are you
Water
telling me
freezes at a
it's going to be
temperature.
40 degrees and snowing?
Well, it's just something about up in the atmosphere. It's actually
could
not.
be
It's
colder.
colder.
Right,
could
but
be
as
colder.
it matriculates down, it's going to have
Maybe
to...
the speed at which it's falling.
Right.
I ain't no scientist.
This is Neil deGrasse Tyson star
Yes,
talk.
that's
Star
what I'm
talk.
talking about. I love
I
that.
love
He
that.
said,
yeah.
in the particles.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
No,
Did
it's
I have
so,
enough time to fall?
it doesn't have enough time to fall, so
Okay.
it's falling so fast that it doesn't melt in time, so
Okay.
it comes as like snowflakes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I like
I think,
that.
I don't
I'm
know.
down
Yeah,
with
no,
that. I
that
buy
sounds
that.
good.
I
That
buy
sounds
that.
good.
That sounds like one of those just something your kids ask you. Just say a thing confidently. And they're like, "Okay, Dad," and I'm
Well,
like,
you know one thing about me,
whatever.
I'm a lie about some science. Like,
Oh, for sure, for sure.
I don't know if that was true or not. I hope we don't got no scientist listeners.
Say it confidently.
They'll write in and be like, "That's actually not how snow in 40
That's
degrees
fine.
works."
You
I'm
got to
like,
come on the show and explain it.
And
to
Yep,
me.
it
yep.
increases engagement.
Yes.
You know, it's
Exactly right.
I mean, that's how we get people on.
Just rage
Engagement.
baiting people. I'm just like, yeah.
All the best podcasts, rage bait.
Yeah,
Right.
it's just
Yeah,
listen.
wild content.
Listen, there is a story. I did read the story that was really funny. There was this person on Reddit who was some sort of coder or something, and he said, "I found the best way to solve a complex problem. It's not to ask a question; it's to intentionally propose the wrong answer, because everyone will be so excited to correct you,
That's true.
they will give you the right answer." And so he had all these examples of relatively simple stuff, but being like, "Oh, I made this website and this tag for blah blah blah," and people were just like. He did the same thing, how do I implement this? And it was like one person, right? So he was like, if you just lob
Lies.
a really imperfect solution on
Yeah.
purpose, people will correct you in a heartbeat. If you ask, it's like, can someone help me? He's like,
No
ain't
one's
nobody
helping me.
messing with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People hate people
I was
who
like,
want to
man,
learn.
people are weird, but that was so funny. It was so funny.
But
yeah.
like being right. Yeah.
Right? And I was like, there you go. Anyway.
Well, we're thrilled to be joined by Gerald Higginbotham, Assistant Professor of Public Policy and Psychology at the Frank Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy at the University of Virginia, a St. Louis, Missouri native with a PhD in Social Psychology, proud graduate of University of California and Stanford University. His research aims to emphasize the importance of common barriers to considering history as relevant for how we perceive ourselves, others, and for social policy today. But most excitingly for me, our next guest on this episode of Envision Radio.
Yeah. Speaking of
appreciate
people
y'all
smarter
for
than
having
us, goodness.
I know. Ooh, you don't want to see this one. My bio, one sentence. My name is from.
I never know how much to include. That's actually cut down.
That is
I do it.
not an affliction I suffer from.
But I never want people to feel like they have to cut their bio. I'm like, I asked somebody for a 3 or 4 sentence, and I'm like, I don't want to undercut your
Cut
accomplishment.
it, dude. Yeah.
Like, give me all
Right,
10 pages. Somebody
Run
gave
it.
us 3 pages before.
Run it.
One person gave us 3 bios. They were like, this is the media, this is
that's-
the
yeah,
scholarship,
that's-
and this is my personal one without no works.
That's-
Yeah.
And I just was like, okay, and I just sent them the price. I was like, well, here go the 3 bios.
That's-
However you want
that's-
to work these in.
I said, I was like, keep whatever you want, take whatever. I was like, just
No,
mention the St.
when you
Louis.
said that, I said,
was
few.
like,
Yeah.
I'm just going to try to pick the best ones out of it.
Yeah.
I appreciate
That woo. Okay, so you're from the Midwest, and then you did a big California swing.
Yeah.
So we'll start there. Just because I'm interested in that. We'll start there. We'll go forward, and then we'll go back to sort of childhood, and then at that point, who knows? We get to a point in the show where it's just like
talking.
we're not really sure what's going to happen.
Like
we
just how you
start
saw at the beginning.
Yeah, we start with a little personal history. We want to get to know you, and then kind of it'll just land somewhere, and we'll keep going.
We're good. We're good. No,
But talk a little bit. Yeah, had you? So you spent a lot of your academic career in California. So how'd you make it out there?
So born and raised St. Louis, from birth to high school. But my parents are from L.A. So my mom's from Compton, dad's from Inglewood.
Okay.
So I always would go back out there to visit grandma and uncles, aunts, see everybody. So in my mind, I was like, I want to get back to Cali.
Sure.
Like once I leave high school.
Like I'm not a real St. Louis guy. I'm an LA guy at my DNA level.
A fusion, right? Like I rep St. Louis, but it was also too like I love my time every single time I went out and visited LA. I mean, like the weather, you have like the water, like the people. And so when I went and applied for undergrad, I got into Stanford and was like, okay, I'm going to the Bay. Like that's near LA.
Sure.
Like that's cool. It's
California is
nothing
the craziest
like LA.
state on the planet of Earth.
You mean like the length? What do you mean?
Just the whole thing.
Yeah,
it's so big. It's so
I've never
many
been to
different
California.
things.
So many different climates.
Yeah. I mean, it's like different
That's
countries, and you don't understand until you've been there or until you've looked at it on a map.
Yeah.
It's like when people from Europe are like, "Hey, I'm coming to the U.S. I'll be in Ohio," and I'm like, "That's
nowhere
close to me."
Don't ask me. I'm not in Ohio.
And so, like, I have a buddy who lives in like San Diego, and another friend who like works for LAFC, and they're like, "Hey, man, like, you need to look at a map, right? Like, these are not close places." To me, it's just like, oh, you're just in.
If you're in the state, you should be close enough
it's like
to
2 hours
drive
away.
there.
But then you add traffic, and then that's just a whole
the worst
other
thing.
Yeah.
Right. But to your point, the culture. I mean, San Francisco is much different than LA. It's much different than San Diego. It's much different than Sacramento is. I mean, they're all just sort of culturally very disparate places as well.
But my biggest frustration when I got there was the weather, because I was just like, I'm used to LA. It's 70 degrees, but like San Francisco will get down to 30 at night, but also be 80 during the day. So you have to have 2 outfits for both those. You don't get pneumonia.
That's right.
So it was just.
I'm believing all the propaganda because I thought the whole state was hot.
I thought so.
I am believing propaganda. Some propaganda.
I mean, California goes to the most northern part of the
so
country.
weird.
Yeah.
So like,
It's like states long. It's like,
Literally, like it's like
no, it
the
is.
whole
It
East
borders
Coast,
what, like
basically,
Mexico and Oregon or something.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. So
I think that's true.
huge. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, just from a cultural or even just sort of a perceived kind of cultural efficacy standpoint. Right? So you grew up in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Largely, your experiences in California are in Compton and Inglewood, which are obviously places that are rich in culture, but probably are most known for. I don't know what people know them for. I know them for the music.
The music is
right.
right.
And the blackness.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's right. And I think about obviously Kendrick and then Snoop Dogg and Tupac and all that. But then you go to Stanford. Like, what was that like? Was that a culture shock for you to be at like an elite institution?
Yeah, because I didn't do. I always talk about this. Like Stanford's like the first name brand thing.
Sure, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So it was crazy just to see the variety of experiences that people had coming into Stanford. Like, so I learned a lot about the diversity of Black folks. Because for me was it was a financial decision. So like to go to Stanford was cheaper than for me to go to the state school in Missouri. So
kidding.
The financial aid package that they were able to offer was less than what Stanford was.
Seems like an easy choice.
So it was a very easy choice in that regard. But also too, when I went and visited, I think my class was about 14% Black, like the incoming class at Stanford, which was
that's pretty good.
higher. Yeah,
I was about to say
Missouri.
that's higher than I thought. Higher than I thought it would be.
You're doing good.
Yeah.
That's almost double.
Yeah, they've struggled since then.
Sure.
But yeah, I felt very fortunate. So when I went and visited, I'm like, wait, there's we got Black people here.
Yeah,
all these different
sure.
types of stuff. But when I got there, it was a huge culture shock. I mean, just going from again like a very like predominantly Black schooling context in St. Louis, when like public high school, like again huge class sizes, to kind of going to Stanford and just like being in a context where even though there was a lot of Black people around, like going from a context that's like 80 to 85%, 90% Black to a place that's 14, it's just like I had to find my Black people.
Sure.
Like when I was living around non-Black folks, it was just, I was excited to learn and to experience other people's cultures, but I'm like, where are my people?
Yeah.
And so it was a huge culture shock. So it's a story I tell people. I studied abroad, like getting out the country for the first time in my junior year, and I felt less culture shock like living in Santiago, Chile, than I did transitioning to Stanford.
Sure.
And people were just like, oh, was that hard? I was like, no, I made the transition from St. Louis to the Bay and Stanford. Like it was easier to go to Chile than to
Chile got the same demographics. It felt like home.
Yeah, different language. Really, yeah. Talk a little bit about that from sort of a cultural capital standpoint, and I mean that from, it would seem that most people would go like, if you get into Stanford, you go to Stanford. I don't care where you're from. I don't care what you like. That's a place where you go. Yeah. Certainly from like an outcome and sort of a standpoint, and we're exposed to that as sort of like you said, a name brand thing. Yeah. Do you think, there's obviously seemingly huge academic value to that, right? And obviously a credentialing value that you say, I go to Stanford the same way you say go to Harvard, same way you go to UVA. Yeah. For you, as you reflect on your younger self, right? Was it worth it from like what you might have given up from a cultural standpoint? So I love to ask people this question. Like, if you had a kid and they said, I got into Stanford, I got into Howard, or I got into Stanford and I got into A&T, like, what would the recommendation be, or what would the conversation be? Because you're sort of trading on two different things, right? Yeah. You're trading the experience that you had, which was like, I just sort of seek out my place and feel like a little bit of fish out of water, but is it worth it to be a fish out of water in that water, giving the sort of reflexive nature of what that credential gets you on the back end?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think for me, again, like I said, when I went and visited, like at the time, like there was a strong Black community. So we had like Black Community Services Center led by Jan Barker Alexander, who like did a lot to create like a safe place for Black folks to also not just be Black, but to explore and learn and to challenge their Blackness. And I think to be better humans. And so that to me was, I felt like I had the best of both worlds because I was able to, I remember when I got in, there was a person who was currently at Stanford from St. Louis, and she told me, she was like, if you want to go to Stanford and only see Black people, you can have that option because there's enough of us here. But to your point, I do think that there are obviously differences in what HBCU could offer. And so if I were to think about giving advice to the kids I do not have.
Yeah.
You can't mess up nobody's life right now by your advice.
Same advice you give to the kids right now. It's like, depending on how old they are, they're not listening anyway.
Right.
So.
in the future. It really thinking about like, what is it that you want to get out of college, and particularly thinking, do they have the programs that allow you to get the training that you need to be successful on the back end? And so for me, like when I went to when I was going into college, I actually wanted to be a therapist. Like I wanted to be a psychologist. Like that was my idea of what psychology was. And when I got to Stanford, they didn't do therapy. Like they did research. Like
sure.
Right. And I had no idea what research was at the time, and it turned out I love it. But if I were to go back to my younger self and say, like, if you actually want to do therapy, you need to go to a place that has, what you need to do. But I think also too, college is this place where you also get to explore and learn about who you are, have that self-discovery. And so I think for me, I was coming from an all Black context, and I was just like, I felt like I knew, and again, I think this is kind of hubris in the past, and Stanford challenged me on this. I was like, I know Black people. I feel comfortable around Black people. For me, I'm like, I could go to a HBCU, but I feel like I had that experience in college, in high school. But that's knowing what I know now, that's not true. Sure. But that was my thought process at the time. I was like, this would stretch me in ways where I'm not comfortable going to a place where it's not predominantly Black, but I still was able to find my people, or had enough for me to be able to say I can find my people. So I was grateful for that. Hold on,
we gotta stay true to the ad breaks, because if you're just joining us, this is Insufficient Radio from the United Way of Greater Charlottesville and City of Promise, News Radio 98.9, 1070 AM WNA. Price and Markey here with Gerald Higginbotham, and a big thanks to our friends, to our sponsors, the Jefferson School Foundation. That is jeffersonschoolfoundation.org.
I think it's really interesting the point you made about look at that 14%. That's enough to, if you want to just hang with Black people, you can. I feel like that was my experience with my 10% at UVA.
You talk about this a lot about UVA.
People ask me, they're like, 80%. I don't know what the numbers are now, but I think it was about 10% when I was there at UVA. They were like, there was no Black people. I don't know. All I saw was, I only saw Black people. Yeah. I know that I feel like people are like, no way, but like, I don't really remember being in community unless we were in class, like a couple of classes. But I also was in African American Studies at the Woodson. But I was like, I cannot count on my two hands how many people I was in community with that were non-Black. Because we had that 10% was so many people. My high school was predominantly non-Black, and I come from a very rural community, Orange County. If you know it, shout out to them, I guess. It was a lot of problems and racial. But so my pre-college life was very hard, and I wasn't a lot of people that I can connect to and be in community and have Black spaces. So when I went to UVA, people told me, they were like, "Oh, you should go to UVA because it's really similar to your high school." People were like, "You'll fit in the type of system you've always grown up in. That'll be the type of system there." But when I got there, it was not the type of system there. It was way more Black people than I've ever had in my classes. And so it was like, oh, great, this is the HBCU I needed.
Well, and I think even you think about percentage-wise, it's just so many more people. Yeah,
so many more people.
Right? So even if you extrapolate, William & Mary, I think, was like 5 or 6% when I was there. Now, let's just be very honest, it was largely the athletic department. But again, that's where I was. So the same way that you were in the African American, like you find the group right where you were. But I think it's interesting to your your point of like, I don't know what the demographics of Orange are, but even if they sort of mirror UVA, just you extrapolate that, the actual raw amount
10,
of people that are floating around UVA is much bigger. But I think that's really interesting in that the thought process of, black students or even minority students going to these PWIs in a way that there's sort of that battle between like, it is going to be great for you. Yeah. I don't know that we often cost out the cultural part, but we also don't think about it in the context of you can find your niche. Right, especially in an institution that's as big as Stanford, as big as UVA, like there are enough people that you can sort of find the parts and the pieces. And I think you said something really interesting of like there is this whole journey of discovery, which I don't know. You probably know better than I do, but I think nowadays college kids feel like they should be there already instead of being like, you haven't done anything. Yeah, like, you don't know anything yet, right? Go figure some stuff out. And I wonder, do you see that in your students of like, yo, you're 20 years old. Like, you have no life experience.
I try to so one thing I will say is like, I'm so impressed with the students of these days and like how hard they work and all the things they do. So I'm just like, y'all are involved in
doing
everything.
The most.
You gotta be involved in everything.
Most.
Do you have time to just like sit and be?
Truly.
I remember right before the pandemic, actually, I was in grad school at UCLA and I was talking to a black undergraduate who was like mentoring. And they were talking about just like being so busy, having all like these assignments, all XYZ, and I was just like, you're in your last semester as a undergraduate. Like the things I'm telling you, the things I remember about, right? I'm like the things that I remember as an undergrad was the time that I like spent with my friends. I was like, I don't remember the stress I had over tests and all. And like, and if you're not getting that experience, you're missing out on a huge part. And so I think too, right? The things are like extremely more, like way more competitive than what they used to be. So like you have to have like all of these extracurricular activities. Yeah. You have to try and actively make these connections because they're like the competition is just.
Why is that? Is it more people? Is it like what happened?
I think more people are going to school, right? I think.
You think more people are going to school?
Yeah, I think we're in an era of disinformation. But I think before that, I think people are using college as a means of leveling up where they are economically, historically. So I think more people are going to college. People told you that going to college would put you in a better position. I don't know if that's as true as it used to be, right?
Well, you keep going because we're going to find out. Because I was about to argue the opposite. I was going to say less people are going to college because it's too expensive.
I think UVA just now said they had the most applicants, for the early or something like that. I don't know. Yeah.
And because it's. And I would also have to look up the date on this.
But I don't know the date.
No. But I'm thinking not for what you're saying, but like from this idea of like colleges now, because there's so many more people with the college degree, it feels like it's more of a credential than like what have you kind of learned through the process. Absolutely. And so now I have to, in addition to having this degree, I have to show you all these other things that I've done while I was there. Yeah. And so I think there's this wrestling that students have to do between this ability to explore and really figure out what you want to do kind of separate from those being involved in all of these extracurricular activities. And so, again, I do my best to try and encourage folks to, take time to think, but it's just people don't feel like we have that time anymore.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I just feel like coming from an age where I was in school and people were like, if you want to have a good life, you have to go to college. I just feel like that's the thing that's spiked it. But I could see a world in which in the next decade, that's not the case, and that drops. But I also think that, like, as we know, a lot of women go to college now, and they weren't going to college before, and getting married less. So I do think the college applications are up. Maybe
according to the National Center of Education Statistics,
down or up.
And there's two parts. There's some nuance here, right? So
always.
So and you're right. Yeah, I know. So college enrollment is going up, but it's going up as a recovery from a COVID dip. Gotcha.
Okay.
Right? So from about 2010 to 2020, college enrollment was declining. And not dramatically, but it was declining at the margin.
Yeah.
It sort of bottoms out, obviously, in 21.
Right.
And now it's recovering sort of back to pre-pandemic levels.
Right.
So it's a yes and, right?
Yeah.
I think the larger trend, which I think you picked up on, which is interesting, it's like you're trying to mash together sort of sociocultural and sociopolitical factors as a way of like more women are entering college and entering the workforce, more diverse, more people are coming to the United States to then partake in college, the sort of the U.S. college system. I think that's an interesting thing to think about as a driver. And then the broader context of like it's also becoming increasingly expensive to the point where it's inaccessible.
Right.
Or these universities are saying,
bottom out again.
Or these universities do what they're doing, which UVA does, which I think Yale. I read recently, they're saying if you make under a certain amount and you qualify, you can come.
And that was how I was able to go to Stanford at a cheaper price than like our state school.
Sure.
It was just like, if you make less than X
Right.
amount of money, we'll take care of your tuition. So my tuition was taken care of. I had to pay a bit for room and board, but like Mizzou couldn't do that.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That I find very interesting. Right. And I think
tuition thing?
No, I think just the whole concept of like talent aggregation, and then like what does, I don't know, I mean, you know, you're a professor now, so I'd be interested in your take of like, what is the value of college in your mind? And I don't mean that to be like cynical or goofy. I mean, is it this I went to William & Mary, which is like an incredibly left-leaning liberal arts institution, right? Like you just want to learn how to think. Yeah. I don't know that you came out with a skill, or you know what I'm saying, but you have this. Their vibe is really like, we want to create people that can sort of interrogate the stuff. Yeah. You know, is it that? Is it self-discovery? Is it just having the piece of paper that says, I went to Stanford on it, and you go, okay, that, you know, I mean, how do you sort of mix and match the things?
That's interesting. And also, too, I know that there are people I'm aware that there are people who study this, and so I want to, this is an opinion. This is my opinion versus I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, listen. The caveat on this show is I don't know what I'm talking about.
Opinions.
I always think it's
people are doing research. Thanks for doing the research. We don't have it in front of us, so we got to do it.
If that is you, give me a call, because you can come on too. We can talk about that. Yeah.
I always like to be clear, because like, especially now as a professor, people are just like, oh, what you take is like, and so I try to distinguish between
absolutely.
the two. For me, but I think there's like multiple benefits and I think rationales for college. So one that I think is often under kind of perceived is just the social connections you make. So I can't tell you, being at a place like Stanford, or have gone to a place like Stanford, just like the people I know and that are in my network. Now, do I utilize my network as well as I could and should? Like, probably not. But in terms of like professional things,
absolutely.
No. But the connections are there and the friendships are there. Also, too, I think using friendships in that way feels weird to me. So it's a thing I personally struggle with. But also, too, you do get a chance to learn how to think critically. And I think that's what at best college should do, is teach you or encourage you to be a critical consumer of data, of knowledge, of like opinions, and like being able to distinguish facts from opinions, and being able to, you know, do the work to figure out like what is it that you believe in, what is it that is true. And then also too, like college does provide skills. It depends on what are you going into. Like if you're going into engineering or architect, like you can get those skills. Sure. If you're trying to do psychology or research, you get those skills. If you're trying to use a critical analysis to understand policy, like those, like you do get skills as well. But I think there's beyond just the like what you're learning in the classroom. There's so much interpersonal, social learning that's going on outside of the classroom as well. And then also too, universities have a lot of access to resource now. Again, they take up a lot of resources. Being at a place like UVA, I'm very aware of that, and I think about that a lot. But yeah, I think there are multiple benefits to college. But also too, I'm a person who says like I am frustrated that it seems like we're getting into a world where you have to go to college to have a chance of success.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. That means the number would go up.
Do you think that's true? Do you think that's true? And then I want to hear if you think that's true.
Do I think it's true that you have to go to college to get somewhere?
Yeah, so I turn 38 next week. Okay. Right? So I'm in the era of, thank you. I'll be here with you on my 38th birthday. But I think, I was very much raised in an era where I think the paradigm shifted a little bit, because all the sort of tech luminaries are kind of in that era. The Zuckerbergs and
like I did this. I didn't need a degree. I did it in my basement or something.
Well, it was this interesting story of like, oh, maybe the best way to be successful is to drop out of Harvard, right? Like that. Everyone's like, I went to Harvard for a second, and I built. Right. I mean, it was the generation that was really fed the like, you can build the thing in your garage, and I think the tools got better. The proliferation of the internet helped. Sort of the information being more at your fingertips started to help people go, oh, I can acquire some of these skills that I can then sell outside of the institution, right? So I was raised in that context, but also understand that like everyone else who's like the number 2 at those companies went to Wharton.
Right.
You all got a degree.
And they also dropped out of Harvard. So they had connections and also, too,
you still went to the school.
Right.
Well, totally.
And who also, too, can sell an idea without the credential, right?
So I think that's part of the question,
yeah,
right? Is how much of it is access versus sort of necessary content? And not to say that one's more important than the other, but I think particularly when we think about, economically disadvantaged families or people who don't have access, is it as big of a barrier as we sort of say it is and present it as, or do we just need to find an alternate avenue that's like, hey, look, if you can't afford it, there are these ways to get here, right, where you can sort of circumnavigate the thing. Now, I say this in a room of 3 people who went to relatively elite universities. You got a whole gang of degrees. I barely got a degree. You got a real degree. So, not really the right people to speak on it, but I think it's an interesting, but you're inside of it now. Let me ask you this. Why did you go to grad school? Did you go to grad school to get a credential? Was it a sort of a way to further your learning? Yeah, sure.
Well, no. So it's interesting because after undergrad, I went and worked because I was like, I need money.
Oh, you took some time off? You go straight to grad school?
I was like, I need money.
That's important.
Use that one degree you got. Let's try that and get you a job with this one degree. That's how I was trying to do.
Yeah, but I went back to school because I knew I wanted to do research and to pursue this faculty career. Again, I didn't know if it's possible. I think most people going to grad school will not be faculty, and so it's always this. I think there's a growing reality of that, particularly given kind of the current climate, because the jobs are not there as they used to be, and they also even back in the day, it was maybe there's 80%. There's only 20% of faculty jobs for the number of grad students going through.
No kidding.
At Mass.
I just assume grad students go. They do the faculty part. I thought you were going to teach.
You got the guy here. You ask him.
Yeah, I mean.
But did you want to teach when you were playing what to faculty?
Research? Yeah. I mean, when I first went to undergrad, I was interested in business. And
first therapy, then business.
Yeah, both. My dad's really into financial literacy, so that's always been kind of top of mind for me. But I've always thought I would go and do something and then come back and be instructor because of the experiences that I gained. And then when I got to undergrad, I'm like, oh, you can actually do research. And I was exposed to a lot of social psychological research that it allowed us to use kind of experimental methods to show the conditions and elevate the conditions that Black people we experience. And so I was just if I could spend my career doing that, I would. That's something I could do. But then also I was like, I need this money first. I need some sustenance. But then I went back to grad school because I was just to do that, you need this PhD, this degree, and the training to be able to do research. And so that influenced my decision. And it was tough because I was grad school. You don't pay to be in grad school, but you also don't make a lot of money in grad school. Sure. So I was this is a sacrifice to go back.
What'd you do in that time period between undergrad and grad school?
I literally was working as kind of mid-level management, an industrial supply firm. I was literally
mid-level management.
Yeah, I was literally working in a warehouse. It was the Amazon for kind of big engineering, or space companies. Yeah. It was nothing. The thing that I learned from that was just people will do. If you pay people well, if you give them, you value them, you give them healthcare, all the people will do whatever you ask them to do in terms of work, even if it's people putting screws in boxes, XYZ, but they're paid well, felt valued, folks will work hard. And so I carry that psychology of just if we give people what they need and what they deserve, we will all be better for it.
A shocking concept.
Yeah. I mean, but people
truly though,
really struggle with that. I continue to just to be frustrated by it.
It's interesting, right? And you talk about even in the context of sort of the way our society works. We're like, why can't we find X? And I'm like, what if you paid them more? They're like, it's not about money. I'm like, I bet it is.
Yeah. Or just even if it's not money, it's do you have is it food? Okay, don't give, but do I have the food I need?
Sure.
Right.
So, yeah. I think it's really interesting. Yeah. If you're just hopping in, this is Envision Radio from the United Way of Greater Charlottesville and City of Promise, News Radio 98.9, 1070 AM, WNA, Price and Markey here with. Do you like to be called Professor?
Me? Oh no, Gerald is fine.
Or doctor?
Doctor?
I do.
We've
Gerald.
gone
You didn't
back.
get that PhD to not be called
We
doctor.
had some doctors in here who was
Right?
like, no, it's okay. But somebody was like, yeah, no, say doctor.
Right.
Somebody had 2 PhDs.
If I was
and
a
we like,
doctor
Dr.
lawyer,
Sawyer.
I'd be like Dr. Price Esquire. You gotta put all that in there. Every single bit
Don't
of
let
it.
me get no titles.
I've never been. I didn't do it for the title, and sometimes I feel like the title can be a place of like
Tension?
separation.
Okay.
Like, and I
How so?
don't know. It was a weird thing. Like, so when I graduated from Stanford, like I didn't talk about it a lot outside of like Stanford communities, because it also too it just felt like, I don't know, people like when I go back to St. Louis, we're like, oh, he's from Stanford. I'm like, yo, what are you talking? Like, you know, so
There's that
like,
Stanford guy again.
Yeah, exactly right. And sorry, I'm talking to the mic. So it yes, so I never want that to be a point of separation and hierarchy, and so because sometimes it also like
I get that.
Sure.
So that, but whatever people like Gerald, my students
Dr. Gerald.
call me Dr. H, Professor H.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, what like
Professor H is cool. It's
Yeah.
got a very X-Men feel to
It
it.
does
I
have
like
X-Men
that. Yeah. I like that. I can get on board with that. Shout out to our friends, our sponsors, Jefferson School Foundation, jeffersonschoolfoundation.org. So a lot. How do you decide on like the content of your work, right? And so you have this obviously, sort of going through your academic career, you obviously have this bend towards psychology, and you sort of start and follow that through. But then you take this, African American studies and racism, black. Like, how did you get there?
Yeah, no. Again, like the journey, and a lot of like self-reflection. So again, when I went to Stanford, I had the privilege to be able to study under Dr. Jennifer Eberhardt. Does a lot of research on like the links between race and crime. So how like black people like are criminalized in people's minds. And she used her, not just her research, but also the content of the courses she taught to like elevate those issues and to actually make you like wrestle with it. So as a sophomore, I was able to like, again, just grateful for people advocate for me to like sneak into her class.
Sure.
That was like an upper level class on race and crime. And it was like, I had never seen in multiple classes in the African American Studies department at Stanford. I mean, coming from like a public black school where all my classmates were black, or most of my classmates were black, like us represented in material. So whether that was a class on like race and crime and like trying to elevate the experiences that a lot of us face, or a class on African American vernacular English, where it was like it was a class by John Rickford. It's one of the hardest classes I ever took. It was a linguistics class, like learning about phonemes and homonyms, about like how do we talk and how did the languages, like tracing our creolization of the language and the dialects that we use back to like West Africa. Like it was the most mind blowing thing. And I'm like, I like our final project, we're analyzing like the language Medea uses, and like so. We
really gonna get a cease and desist now.
It was exactly. But in like seeing that like our culture, like it could be like there, like we are worthy of being in,
and it's like purposeful, right?
Yeah. And that was something that like even I'm like, what if myself and other students like me saw ourselves represented in material like this? Like, how much will we see school as for us, right? Like, how much will we be able to learn and about ourselves, about our culture, like at the critical age of adolescence and young adulthood, and what would that do for our community in general? And so I thought a lot about that in undergrad and graduate school, and I got really interested into like, well, what would it look like to teach history and to actually engage with these histories that help us understand like how we got to where we are today. And then I realized there's a lot of resistance to that.
Really?
Right? Yeah. I was like, there's a lot of resistance to thinking about like histories of racism and oppression as
no
important.
way.
Like it's a wild idea. But for me, I wanted to use social psychology to think about like how can we understand and illuminate, one, I think how like we as Black people keep these histories like relevant and close and prescient, and how it informs our understanding of the present. And then also two, how do we encourage other people who either don't know the history or are motivated to not think about this history as relevant to today? How do we get people to grapple with it regardless.
Sure.
And so that shaped a lot of my interest. And then along the way, I feel grateful for a lot of different mentors in a lot of different spaces that kind of encouraged me to think about, like, well, how do I understand and think about historical context as helpful for thinking about policy and putting like issues such as fundamental rights, and how do people support fundamental rights such as like voting and firearms, and like incorporating that perspective into the work that I'm doing in psychology, which sometimes doesn't do as great a job as considering history as relevant context for understanding how we think about things today. Long-winded answer, but
I think there's an interesting argument of sort of the connective tissue between things that seem disparate, right? Yeah. From sort of psychology to politics to, sort of how that affects public perception. And I think, it seems to be a very clear and present danger. Yeah. Right. When we think about sort of the criminalization of marginalized groups and the, everything's going on now with the SAVE Act, and we're just going to, want to make sure everybody's voting, right? I mean, there's all, does that fit into your? Is that part of your wheelhouse?
So
And so I'm interested in where the like how'd you get? Where does that come from? Right. So and just like the reading of it, right? We have like a lot of work on sort of like culture and identity, and then it seems to be like as you get into your postdoctoral work, you pick up a public policy piece. Was that just the path, or did you land in a place where you're like, that's interesting?
Yeah, no. So in grad school, I started to work on firearms, and that was kind of the first, I think, very policy-focused work. And so in social psychology, you're interested in, like, trying to understand, like, attitudes. Okay. But then also, too, you're trying to make the case of, like, why does this matter?
Sure.
So I can say you believe something, but do you support? Okay. What does that look like in practice? Are you going to support this particular policy? Are you going to support greater access to whether it's like food stamps or XYZ? Yeah. And so for me, when I was in grad school, I thought about like asking the policy attitudes as a way to show this matters, not just because people say or what they'll say on a survey, but they're more likely to actually support or oppose something like stricter gun laws or XYZ. And so when I was interviewing so I started here as a postdoctoral research assistant or fellow in 2021 during the pandemic. And that to me was, when I was interviewing for the position, like the questions that I was being asked, it just fit. Because social psychologists, we experimentalists, we like a little, do you control, like you have one study or one experimental condition that you think is going to affect change in this way, do you have it like tightly controlled in another experiment to really show that what you're saying matters for the psychology actually matters. Which is valuable, and I value that's my training as a social psychologist. We do experiments, but sometimes the focus on the experimental method comes first before you ask, like, is the question that you're asking, does it even matter?
Yeah, sure.
And in the policy where like that's where you, or at least in the Batten School here, UVA, the forefront was like, okay, how are your methods, but also like, why are you asking the question that you're asking? Like, why does it matter for society? And so I've been able to, again, in the policy school here, there's a big group of social psychologists. I was able to actually lean into not just using my social psychological training to study these things, but actually ask the questions that I cared a lot about. So it's, one of the things that we were studying in the firearms work is kind of who's the Second Amendment perceived to be for?
Sure.
Right. And this kind of stemming from that work is that, some people think about kind of Second Amendment gun rights as like for a particular group of folks. And so this idea that it begged the question, like, is this perceived as a right or more of like a privilege? So when I got to UVA, I started working with a professor in the psychology department, Dr. Hasmeen Brown-Ianuzzi, and we started thinking about, okay, well, can we use the context of voting to actually show people will endorse, what we consider a fundamental right in a democracy that apparently we have in the U.S. Will they actually say voting is a privilege? Because it's hard with the Second Amendment, because it's actually, there's an amendment in like Bill of Rights that says like this is a right. So that's kind of weird. But there's I don't like sharing this, but like there's no affirmative right to vote. Like we have protections against discrimination against voting, but it's not there's an affirmative right to vote. And so there's more leeway of like, is it a right? Is it a privilege? And so we're able to actually study that. And then what does this perception of voting as a privilege mean for, do you support increasing voter access, or are you more in support of, voter ID laws, which disproportionately impact marginalized communities? And even some, we asked some questions about Jim Crow era disenfranchisement laws. We find that perception matters for support for, taxes or English language competency tests. And so, I think about like the policy aspect is like showing why these psychologies matter, and making that link explicit, because people vote. And so there's the psychology and people support policy or don't support policy. So understanding how people think, the attitudes that they hold, I think makes a lot of sense to understand, like, how do we get people to think differently about policies that would, benefit everyone.
Are you encouraged or discouraged by sort of the truths that are revealed in that process, right? And so I guess here's what I'm asking. How much of it is sort of information asymmetry, right? So I would venture a guess that even in this room, I'm the only person that's read the Constitution top to bottom. I don't know if that's true. I know you haven't.
No, I haven't.
And the top to bottom.
Don't point. He just
right, and so but that's what I'm saying, right? And only because it was my job. I worked at Montpelier. We were doing a bunch of James Madison work, right? But in so talking, all of what we're talking about sort of harkens back to, the Second Amendment was a constitutional amendment that says a well-regulated militia, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah,
so how much of that is just like people just don't get it versus, you see what I'm saying? So I'm trying to get to that point of like, are you finding that like there is just a fundamental lack of quality information that people don't understand, so they're gonna make decisions based on whatever they get their hands on? It's kind of a dual double-edged sword of like market manipulation in the context of sort of information asymmetry. Is that true? And if so, does that change your thinking about policy, or maybe it's not true?
Yeah, I think nuance.
Sure, totally.
Yeah. So there definitely is, like, knowledge matters. So there's research by Fia Salter, who's now a professor at Duke University, that shows that like Black and white Americans perceive racism more in systemic manifestations of discrimination, because it's like, so versus like more isolated. Like people could pick up on like, I call you a slur, like that's racist, versus kind of these more my bigger picture, like kind of system level discrimination. And what she finds is that part of that is attributed to a lack of historical knowledge amongst, or a gap in historical knowledge between Black and white Americans, right? So like knowing this history helps you understand the present. And so there is this knowledge aspect, but there's also a motivated aspect of it.
Okay.
So for example, in some of the work on how do people think about history and time that we're doing, we give both Black and white people the same histories. Yeah. And even with the same historical information, it's perceived differently.
Interesting.
And so there is definitely a factual aspect to it, but even and this is the psychology of it, we're motivated to feel good about ourselves, which then implicates we're motivated to feel to feel good about the groups that we belong to or the systems that we belong to. So if you're giving me information that challenges that, I'm going to do some strange things to try and still hold on to my feelings or my positive feelings towards my group, which is reflected on myself. So both and.
Let me ask you just like a bizarre kind of politics, but psychology of politics question. How do people, or do you know, or have you sort of thought about how people kind of, certainly in this day and age where like we can agree things are weird, like it feels like a lot of people are voting either against their own self-interest or at least against, like, in the rank order of issues, right? And I think part of the issue with politics is it's become very binary. You're either all in one or all in the other, right? But we've seen, and even some minority groups, you're going, they're coming for you.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, am I misconstruing that, or is that a thing? It just seems really interesting that you can sort of look across, particularly the understanding of history of race in America, and then you're looking in sort of the current climate going, it's interesting that like you would vote for that given what we have known to be true.
Well, I think that's interesting, because in some way, like this to me, and so I have two minds about this. Like one, like I do wonder how much of like certain groups voting for, if we're talking about like the current president,
sure,
right, that were not white voting for them. Like some of it is a question of, do you like what is your understanding of how race works in this country? And that might be tied to lack of historical information about how races work. That there's this idea that when it comes down to it, there's this distinguishing between good and bad, like minority. So there's actually reading this paper. One of my colleagues in grad school was looking at like how do Latinx individuals kind of feel kind of linked to fate with undocumented folks, and like in part what does it mean for kind of their collective action intention. So if you think that you're going to be misperceived as one, there's kind of this more like we're all in it together, versus if you think that there's this
solid, there's and
I think it's like Black folk, we understand like there's no when it comes to whether it's like police, like there's no good bad distinction. Like I went to, and I think this is my experience growing up in St. Louis. I would go Stanford, UCLA. Like it doesn't matter when I'm in a police interaction. Like
that's right. They don't ask for your resume first, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and but also too, you think about. I think about the ways I manage that, right? Like, so I have a Stanford alumni, license plate decal thing.
And I got UVA tags.
Yes, I do. Right? But that
can mean anything, I guess.
Yeah.
That could mean anything.
Yeah. But like that, and signals like a strategy of like, and it's I think it's a really saddening reality, right? That like, for example, like there's kind of, I've seen stories about like Black fathers putting like teddy bears in the back of their cars to just show like, hey, like see me as human.
I'm harmless. Yeah,
right. See, in harmless, but also just see me as human first.
Yeah. Probably do that weird smile when we walk past people. Crazy. Look, before Kanye went crazy, what did he say? Even if you're in a Benz,
you know
right. In a coupe, right?
Right. No, absolutely. And so I think that there's a attunement to that reality amongst Black folk that might now be becoming more socialized amongst other groups. I mean, I think about like the kind of again the stop the Asian hate movement back during COVID, right? I think there's probably a lot of different thinking in like communities that are often kind of stereotyped as not being here legally in kind of what's going on today. And so we'll see how that shapes, what policies they support, what people they support. But again, that does feel like there's a lack of historical reckoning or even understanding of like how race and prejudice and in many ways white supremacy works in the U.S.
If you're just jumping in, this is Envision Radio from the United Way of Greater Charlottesville, City of Promise, News Radio 98.9, 1070 AM, WNA. Price and Markey here with, we're going to go with Dr. H. Gerald Higginbotham here hanging out with us.
His mental powers.
That's right, exactly right.
That's
right. He's the Black Professor X. Big thanks to our sponsor, our friend Jefferson School Foundation, proud owner of the Jefferson School City Center, where education, innovation, and community engagement come together to build a brighter future. That is jeffersonschoolfoundation.org.
So, you're from St. Louis. You start loving California. You go out there for undergrad. You stay out there for your PhD. Yeah. Why come back? Why the East?
Not even back. Flew back. Flew over.
Why past your Midwest roots? Why? Yeah. Why specifically, or is it historical context to being in Virginia that you thought would lend to your work? Like, why UVA?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, so again, I was finishing my dissertation in the pandemic, and again, I think there's a lot of us who have PTSD about what that time felt like, but the jobs were scarce.
I lived in the house with no jobs. I don't know what y'all mean job was scarce. I lived in the house with no jobs. Beyond that, I think it was a blessing because I have found, and like I said during the interview process, I was like, oh, like this is where I need and want to be. And again, I remember when I was moving out here, I told my mom, she was just like, Charlottesville. She was like, what? Are you sure? Like, what? And because all I knew at that time was the Unite the Right, like, the good people on both sides, like all those, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
That's us.
Yeah. That was. And so all my friends were like, "Wait, Charlotte, you know,
right? You can go anywhere in the world.
You can go anywhere else.
Anywhere in the world."
but no, I when I have like came and started doing my research here, I was one, like, there's so many people here, y'all, like, folks that you like doing great work, making change, and also too, like, asking and interrogating kind of our histories in ways that aren't happening in other places. So in LA, like, when I went to California or Stanford, I remember, it's still a good friend, really good friend, conversations about race and racism. Like, some of the things, they're like, racism, that's not a thing. Yeah. Right. And I was just like, let me take you to St. Louis. Like, we can talk about it. But there's this, like, distance, right? There's a perceived distance. I mean, California also has wild history. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know the history, but I'm sure.
But I mean, Black Panther's like all of it. Especially
if you grew up in, like, Orange County.
Are you talking about California's Orange County?
I had a woman married friend who grew up in Newport Beach. And
my roommate from Orange County, my freshman year.
Just like some of the stuff, and she was lovely, and I'm still friends to this day. But sometimes some of the stuff she'd say, I'm like, you're the bug, not the feature. Like, the rest of us, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's not that's a very minor experience. It was just funny to have like to understand that your entire world is just colored by, like, the perception of it, and so people be like. Is she for real? Like, is she serious?
I was like, what kind of history, like, Virginia history and California history? What do they teach? Like, y'all learn about Harriet Tubman out there? I don't know what y'all learning. Y'all Rose Parks.
It is different, though. It is a lot, yeah.
But you also feel differently connected to it because you're like, that happened over there.
Like, people talking about the Civil War out west, are like, I don't like that was part of it. She was like, we didn't learn about, like, we weren't even part of the country. We weren't even here yet.
We wasn't us. So I don't know who y'all was fighting with, but not us.
Yeah.
And I think even if they do learn about it, it is this distance that you can have. Like, that. Yeah, that wasn't us. Sure. Like, that's backwards people, XYZ, in the Midwest and the South and those slave states. But like, here it feels like you can't get away from it. You can't just, like, you got Monticello down the street. You got UVA's grounds, like, being, like, you have the garden still.
Yeah, sure.
And so. That's it for me in the work that I do in terms of thinking about history, thinking about the role of history on our, like, present psychology. The starting point is different, and so that has been really illuminating for me, and particularly thinking about, like, how do we make these histories feel more relevant, more present, more proximal to today. That has been a experimental condition for me myself, right? Like, being closer, being connected to it. Has illuminated a lot.
Do you have a moment or a finding or sort of a research project you can point to that, is let me ask you this question first. Is the goal of a lot of your work to present research and findings, or is it to, like, influence policy, right? So are you saying, I want to study this as a way to, like, move a thing, right? Or is it like more academic in nature?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a couple of reasons why I think doing research. So one motivation is to, I think, elevate the experiences and the psychologies of Black folk. So I say when I do a research study, I have a younger brother. Like, I love talking to him about it, and if he's like, "Duh," then I'm like, "Okay." Then that means so that's like one goal for sure. And there, I think in that that does a couple of things. So one, it allows people to be able to utilize my research to advocate for particular things. So I did like a project in grad school. It was, like, very, very straightforward. That was, like, talking about, like, the benefits of, like, actually having authentic representation in film in terms of diversity. And that, like, I had Black friends who were in the industry at the time, and they're like, we could use this to, be able to advocate for, like, why this work that we're doing, or why this particular story we're trying to tell is important and is going to do well at the box office. And so I think just by, again, elevating psychologies and trying to, I think, interrogate, like, how race and racism shape, and not just race, but, like, general prejudice shapes the experiences and realities of how people move and work and live and vote in the U.S. I think it can be helpful for people who are trying to move policy. there is, I think particularly when one thing though that I do try to do is to show inconsistencies. Right, like I value consistency. Sure. You know, I'm always working on it. I'm not perfect, but and also too being from Missouri, which is the show me state. It's like you got to show me that this is something that you value, or as like a writer XYZ. Mm-hmm. So in like the work on firearms, if you say you value the Second Amendment, but you only value for some people, like do you sure. value? If you say like we're in a democracy and we all should be able to vote, but you're willing to restrict some citizens from being able to vote, like do you actually value that? And I hope my work starts conversations. I haven't done the like how to change, like tying it to a specific policy that we're trying to advocate for change for. However, a lot of the work is using like, will you be more supportive of a particular policy? So, for example, in the work where we're trying to get people to think about history as closer to the present, we'll ask questions around, should this history be taught in school? So if you think about this history as more proximal, more relevant to the present, you should also think about like, oh, this might be important history to learn. Sure. And that can be used by folks who are trying to think about like, how do we get more support for teaching histories that are being targeted right now. I'm in school again.
Looking ahead, what do you hope for in your work, in your scholarly pursuits, or for the future?
Yeah, I continue to desire to illuminate the experiences of marginalized communities, and particularly Black folk. Because that's the communities I know and I come from, and I often can speak the best to, as I also to think about like coalitions more broadly. I hope that the work, I hope that my work continues to kind of disrupt some mythologies that I think are important, right? So this idea that like voting, like if we like again this idea that voting or rights are privileges, of that's something that we could kind of have broader conversations about. My work on kind of making history feel closer, like we do some work in terms of like thinking about like how might ancestry be utilized as a way to get people to contend with the fact that like these histories that we say happened so long ago are like we're connected to them. Like I'm like 4 generations from like slavery, and if you think about it like that versus thinking about that was now at this point like 170 years ago, like that is a different type of reckoning. And so I hope that the work continues to challenge people to think differently about how we how we reckon with, I think, our collective histories. Because if we don't, then like how do we move forward together? Like if we have a different view, if we all have different views of what the U.S. is or has been, like how do we move forward together as a collective? So I hope my work continues to challenge those things.
I say that all the time. Ruby Bridges is like 4 years older than my mom.
Yeah.
Oh, dang.
Yeah.
Right? History is so close.
Yeah, she was born in 1954. Yeah. Like she's 70.
When I was growing up, my grandma, her name was Rosa. We had learned about Rosa Parks.
Okay.
And based on the years when she had passed away, she was older than Rosa Parks by 2 years. I was like, it could have been her. Rosa Smith could have sat on the bus.
Yeah.
It's that close.
Though. It's that close.
I knew her. I was alive when she was alive.
Yeah.
Truly. I was very young, but I remember thinking like, oh, it's that close.
Yeah. I told my students, I'm like, when my mom was born, if she was a voting age, she couldn't vote.
Couldn't vote.
Like, it's just, it's just like even those like small things.
My parents went to segregated schools.
Yeah, my dad's oldest sister her first year in like 6th grade or whatever the years were, was the first time that Orange had been integrated. Girl, you 1 year older, girl, you would have been in all, you was with some all blacks for a little bit.
Right. And that's, again, like that's a person that's very much alive. Right, so it puts it in. It's certainly in very interesting context, and that I think for me came in the whole Charlottesville thing, where my grandmother's 85, and you could see the response through the ages, right? Of like people our age were like, "This is crazy," and she was like,
"Crazy, wow!
This is a slow Tuesday where I grew up.
It's just another Tuesday."
She was like, "No one lit your yard on fire. Like, you'll be all right." I was like, "Oh,
yeah,
okay. Right." I mean, it was like
Grandma, you couldn't have a bank account. Like, please.
Right. Yeah, that's wild, which is wild.
Yeah.
My mom too, similar, and They moved to Anaheim when she was in high school, and she was one of the first Black people to be. So even in like
That's
California,
crazy.
that has
That's
like,
crazy.
this liberal, like again,
It
not
feels
that
impossible.
different.
Yeah. The time dilation of it's very weird.
Like, girl,
right?
what
It's
do you
very
mean
weird.
you older than Rosa Parks?
Yeah.
This is you become. It's like when those old kids are like, "Was you around with the dinosaurs?"
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, elementary school kids, if you're like, I'm 40, they're like, were you a slave?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I literally get it. I'm like, girl, what do you mean?
Right. What do you mean?
But it's also
I'm glad it was you and not me.
Yeah.
You got a lot of resilience with you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
You could have a bank
Yeah.
account. You could have $20 to your name.
Yeah.
You made it. You made a way.
I mean, they do I don't know if this happened to you on your Alabama trip, but when we went to Montgomery, at EJI, they like showed us a video of this little girl who was like 9 at the time of the march across the bridge. And the person who gave the tour was the girl.
Shut up.
I lost
That's
my
wild.
mind.
Did they tell you that at the end?
At the end.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Wow.
We
Wait,
thought
so it's
you.
the legacy site?
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
we went.
I just went in November. It was amazing.
And so
took a
you're
whole
watching this
picture.
video, and there's this young girl that
That's
she's
crazy.
talking about, like, how young she was.
Can
And
you
talking,
believe how
John
young this
Lewis, and
girl
even
was?
John Lewis at the time was 22,
Yeah.
right?
crazy.
And so we're talking about this whole thing, and then and people start to clock it because they do like an interview with her as an adult, and she's like, yeah, this is da da da, people are like,
Wait a
That's
minute.
you.
Yeah, wait a minute. Yeah.
and the whole place was like, stop.
Stop.
Yeah.
Like,
We
hold
thought
up.
you was with us, but you with them.
Yeah.
Right? It was, but it was that exact thing.
Yeah.
Of like, it seems like
All of
some
us seem to be in a different
relic
realm
of
when
the
y'all was
past,
like- Yeah.
and you're like, that's her,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
you, right there.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
Right?
And is also too right, like people who were also opposing integration, like the
Alive and
Jerry
well.
Jones stuff. I was just
Alive
like,
and well.
Yeah, so
Sure.
it helps put things in the context.
Yeah, totally. It's real. Like
yeah.
it's absolutely. I mean, I think that's incredibly interesting. So just real quickly, I don't really understand the mix well enough between sort of like teaching and research. Does it ever become like one or the other, or is it forever kind of a dual thing? Or do you see yourself being like, I'm going to edge out of teaching because I want to pursue this sort of like larger agenda?
Yeah,
or the other way around, I guess.
It's usually, I mean, in a university like UVA, which is kind of like is considered like a top research one university, it's both. Like it will always continuously be a dual thing. Some people are able to like get grants that reduces the amount of teaching you do, but I mean, you're faculty, so like your contribution is research, obviously, but also to like one of the reasons why you're here is because like students get a chance to interact and learn from folks who are doing this research, and so it's both and I enjoy being in the classroom. Like I do enjoy that. I mean, it is tough. Like I was telling someone, I was like, I enjoy like the talking, interacting, the mentorship, XYZ. Grading is always my that's all. Yeah, the grading part is always the.
Every teacher's like, every teacher's like, I love the kids.
Tell me, is this any good?
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you give this person if you had read it?
It's always tough. I got my rubrics and that, like, I said all the
it.
things, but yeah, it is. Yeah. But I truly enjoy teaching, and in part because like research takes a long time. Like you got like the progress, it feels slow. You got to get it reviewed. You got to do more. Go back to the drawing board. So that takes time, but. Being able to engage with students, being able to engage with people you're mentoring in general, like you can pour into them, and also too you can help them again do this process of discovery. Like again, you don't have to agree with what I say,
sure,
but or the research, and we challenge it, we criticize it. But you're connecting dots now that you didn't before you came into the class, and like seeing them like take it and do other things is just amazing. I really enjoy that.
That's awesome. Look, big thanks for hanging out with us. That's excellent.
No,
if you guys have ideas for the show or want to get in touch with us, again, check us out on social media on all platforms at United Way Cville or at City of Promise. The inbox is open, UnitedWayCville.org. Do you, is there places where people can like read research or, sort of get a feel for what you're up to? Is there a place where they can do that?
Yeah, I should be better at this. So, I'm not on social media as much anymore.
Because you're a psychologist. They said, don't get on there.
Protect your mental health.
No, actually, no. And
When you
when
become some psychology, man, you don't get on social media no more.
when I got off, like it's just the mental health.
Truly, though, right?
benefits,
It's
like,
incredible.
it is. Yeah, and the time.
I don't know what y'all talking because I'm on it, but I believe you.
Yeah, just do a week. Do a week
Take a
cleanse.
hiatus.
Do a week cleanse. But yeah, I mean, I have the landing page on the UVA Batten website, and from there you can find most of my stuff. Also, too, folks might not know, you can look up people on like Google Scholar, so you can like look up academics, and you can find all of the research that they publish.
No, I didn't know that.
So scholar.google.com.
Scholar.google.com. Yep. Don't search Professor H. Search Gerald Higginbotham, and you will get a wide swath of great work if you're interested in following up and checking it out. We get support, of course, on the show from folks like you. And so if you like what you hear, share it with your friends, your colleagues, your enemies, your family, whomever. And you get new episodes every week wherever you listen to your podcast. Best way to support us that are making a contribution to the Promise, United Way, any of our other local nonprofits, how we do our community-based work, and, of course, this show. Big thanks to our sponsors, to our friends, Jefferson School Foundation, jeffersonschoolfoundation.org. For Gerald and Marky, this is Price. Stay dry.
Peace.
See you next week.
I appreciate you.